and welcome back to my series examining Missing 411, Western United States and Canada by the author David Paulides. Today we'll be looking at the Oregon chapter of the book. Let's just dive right in. Since this is the very beginning of the chapter, I want to quickly cover the chapter introduction. I will begin with a quote directly from the book. Quote, "But there is a very dark story associated with this alpine spot. Early American Indians knew the lake as a place that they would not roam. There were stories of bad things occurring to travelers who ventured into the area, and the natives knew to stay away." Close quote. I believe that the story that he is referring to can be found here, which I will read the brief part of now. There was a spirit of the mountain called Chief of the Below World, Lao, and the spirit of the sky was called the Chief of the Above World, Skel. Sometimes Lao would come up from his home inside the earth and stood on top of Mount Mazama, one of the highest mountains in this region. During one of these visits, he saw the Makalak chief's beautiful daughter and fell in love with her. He promised her eternal life if she would return with him to his lodge below the mountain. When she refused, he became angry and declared that he would destroy her people with fire. In his rage, he rushed up through the opening of his mountain and stood on top of it and began to hurl fire down upon them. The mighty Skel took pity on the people, and he stood atop Mount Shasta to defend them. From their mountaintops, the two chiefs waged a furious battle. They hurled hot rocks as large as hills. They made the earth tremble, and they caused great landslides of fire. The people fled in terror to the waters of Klamath Lake. Two holy men offered to sacrifice themselves by jumping into the pit of fire on top of Lao's mountain. Skel was moved by their bravery, and he drove Lao back into the Mount Mazama. When the sun rose next, the great mountain was gone. It had fallen in on Lao. All that remained was a large hole. Rain fell in torrents, filling the hole with water. This is now called Crater Lake. If I'm understanding the paper correctly, this story, this legend, is used to explain the eruption of Mount Mazama. You see, the Native Americans had actually settled this area before the mountain exploded, and it would have caused a lot of devastation to the area. Since then, the natives avoided the place because, according to what I read, they believed that it was so sacred that even to just look upon the holy place would cause death. In a more in-depth paper, it discusses how it was believed that the spirits that were in the area would chase you down and kill you. I will link both of those in the sources below. There are also locations around the crater that were used for spiritual visions. I do my best to show both sides and be unbiased. So I wanted to highlight that the talk about Native Americans not wanting to go there is actually pretty spot on. Now, a skeptic may point out that the whole story is just a supernatural explanation for the very natural event of a volcano erupting, but being chased down by spirits and being killed sounds pretty scary to me, and that part is not related, presumably, to the actual volcano. B. Bukowski, who was 30 years old at the time, went missing on Wednesday, February 22, 1911. He lived in Burns, Oregon around this time. He enjoyed the natural beauty of the state, and he made his living as a professional photographer. He took his kit to Crater Lake in the summer of 1910 and had a great time and was able to capture many pictures, several of which ended up being in the newspaper. At the beginning of February 1911, he gathered up 2 months of supplies and set out to photograph the area in the dead of winter. He made sure to inform his friends and family of the exact route that he'd be taking, as well as the request to come looking for him if he did not return in a month. It was a good thing that he did so, because he indeed did not return. Making good on their promise, a search party was sent out sometime between the 2nd of February and March 3rd. From different articles published in the Mail Tribune, we get a basic timeline of what the searchers found. First, they found a sled and shovels buried under a layer of snow. about 1.5 miles away from the hotel on the lake, which was his destination. These were identified as belonging to Bukowski. Since there were no supplies with the sled, it was supposed that he had made it safely and he had stored his supplies somewhere safe. The search party then went to the hotel to look for him. He was not found, but some of his camera cases were there. No other supplies were present, so the search went back to the original spot where the sled was located. This time, they were more thorough. They found that wood nearby the sled had been chopped. Deducing that Bakowski had done this to create a campfire, they dug into the snow and found a snow tunnel that Bakowski had made as his shelter for at least a couple of days. His supplies were also inside this tunnel, including clothes, 3 cases of used film, 60 cases of unused film, a telescope, and more. Strangely though, there were no cooking utensils found at the site. 2 of his cameras were eventually found at the lodge of the hotel, but Bakowski himself was never located. The searchers believe that he had died. There are some claims made in the summary that I want to cover as well. Since 3 rolls of exposed film were found, he likely was only taking pictures for a single day. Chopping wood would have brought attention to him. Perhaps no cooking utensils were found because he was eating at the time. He heard something outside of his tunnel and was taken, along with his cooking utensils, when he went to check. People are very careful when they're alone, so it's not likely that he fell into the lake. No firearms were ever found, but Bakowski would have had one. Where is it? Lucky for us, Bakowski kept a journal in which he recorded his journey to Crater Lake, as well as his everyday experiences. This was religiously kept from January 21st until January 31st, indicating that whatever happened to Bakowski happened on the 1st of February. As for the supposed missing cooking utensils, I didn't see any mention of them in the articles that I was able to find. I did see that quote-unquote all of his things were found except for cameras, snowshoes, and a couple of blankets. No firearms or lack thereof were ever mentioned in any article that I read. I did my best to find the exact articles cited by Paulides, but I was unable to find any article in the Memphis Mail Tribune that was published in the timeframe given that talks about Bakowski at all, save one in March. That one does not mention cooking utensils. I did find an article from the Crook County Journal in May of 1911 that mentioned cooking in an article about Bakowski, but it just talks about how he melted snow, probably to cook. In the same article, it says that all of his supplies were accounted for, and the cases of film thought to be used were actually not. Another article from the Crook County Journal, this one from March 9th, mentions food and provisions, but also does not note cooking utensils. Given that, and the belongings found in the basement of the lodge, it is fairly clear that he did not go missing from the camp. When searchers were examining the crater around the lake, they observed that the area was so packed with snow that the piles would have created a false rim around the crater. They believed that Bakowski had gone out onto the ledge to take pictures when the ledge gave way as it was only made of snow. There are many crevices and rocks between the rim and the lake, so they believed that he was stuck in one of those or at the bottom of the lake. Such dangers were perhaps on Bukowski's mind, as some of his belongings, which were described as trinkets, were found in the basement of the hotel wrapped in a jacket. There is a theory that this was done to protect them, and that he wanted to have them distributed to his loved ones if something happened to him. It is not mentioned how this belief was reached, if there was a note or something of that nature, but it would be an unusual conclusion to reach without such a thing. No firearms were ever mentioned, but this could be because he didn't have one to begin with, or because one was found and it is included in the all statements in the articles. Even if it's not the case and the firearm did go missing, it's just as likely that it could have gone over the edge of the rim with him if that is what happened to him. Besides all that, the entrance of the shelter was sealed with a canvas door. If you were going out to look for a strange noise that you had heard and you were so intrigued that you took your meal with you to go and take a look around, would you seal up your shelter behind you? I wouldn't. In articles following his disappearance, Bukowski's pictures were published in the newspaper. It is clear that he had a great deal of skill. Herbert Brown, who was of unknown age, went missing at some point in 1935 from Silver Falls State Park. No, that isn't a joke. That's the only information in the book. I'd like everyone to do me a favor. In the comments, post how you could possibly determine that a missing person fits strict criteria like that of missing 411 when you don't have any information on a person besides that they went missing at some point. All that salt aside, the information in missing 411 is so bad that I had a heck of a time finding the truth. In fact, I'm not really sure that I even found the same person who did go missing near Silver Falls State Park, because it occurred in 1930, not 1935. However, the name is Herbert Brown, the location matches. I'll let you decide what you think. Sheriff here plans search for lost man. Rancher missing under mysterious circumstances, reports state. Suicide and foul play both advanced as theories to explain the matter. The mysterious disappearance nearly 6 weeks ago of Herbert Brown, aged rancher living in the vicinity of South Silver Creek Falls, has troubled several residents of that section. This was indicated here on Monday when a party of men, all property owners, living near the Brown Ranch, called upon local officials in an attempt to have a searching party sent out to locate the missing man. It is thought that Brown may have killed himself since he did not take any food with him, and he was armed with a shotgun when he left his home on March 6th. Others think that the man may have become insane and is wandering about the country, while still another theory ventured by the party from Silver Creek vicinity is that Brown may have been the victim of foul play. Family quarrel is reported to the sheriff. In putting the matter before Sheriff O.D. Bauer here yesterday, one of the men declared that there had been a quarrel between Brown and his family on the day he was last seen. It was also pointed out that members of the missing man's family have not made any great effort to locate their relative. A brother, P.H. Brown, owns an adjoining tract. The party of men from the Falls County called first upon District Attorney John Carson, but was unable to see him because of his being out of the city during the afternoon. Sheriff Bauer consented to make an investigation this week, but did not approve of the plan to organize a searching party immediately. Again, I'm not sure if this is the same Herbert Brown, but I think that all the signs point to it being the same person, and missing 411 just got it very, very wrong. If you are able to dig up anything else, let me know. I actually contacted the sheriff's department for that area, and they said that they have absolutely no records of this person. Jess Davis, who was 2 years old at the time, went missing on Sunday, May 8th, 1955, from Gopher County, Oregon. At the time of Jess's disappearance, he was visiting his grandparents' ranch with his parents and siblings. He was playing in the backyard of the ranch house alone when his sisters were playing in the front yard. Only about 10 minutes passed before the family realized that Jess was missing. The family started looking for Jess immediately, but they could not locate him. They called the local sheriff to get some help, and an official search began. The sheriff coordinated 3 bloodhound teams and more than 100 searchers in the area. The canines could not pick up a scent, and the searchers came up empty. They continued searching all through the night. The next morning, on the 9th, loggers walking along the nearby Panther Creek heard crying in the woods. They investigated and found Jess. A doctor said that there were deep scratches on his legs, but he was in otherwise satisfactory condition, despite being outside for 24 hours in 40-degree weather. Even stranger, loggers stated that it appeared as though Jess had been wading through the creek despite the cold temperatures. In his time missing, Jess traveled 6 air miles to reach Panther Creek. He also would have had to cross 2 sets of mountains with an average elevation of 1,000 feet. I'm going to read a section of the book verbatim for you. Quote, "The search for Jess was started immediately with hollering, walking the grounds, etc., but they couldn't find the boy. A call was made to the local sheriff and a formal search was initiated." Close quote. Given that passage, how much time do you think elapsed between the family searching and the sheriff being called? Got your answer? Was it 3 hours? Because that's how long it was before the sheriff was brought in. And it was, of course, longer after that when the bulk of searchers were on the scene. Searchers, by the way, included a single dog team that had volunteered and wasn't necessarily organized by the sheriff. And the exact number of searchers is quoted as both 40 and 100, not that it particularly matters to this case. The search stopped either at 10 p.m. or midnight and did not go through the night, save for the bloodhound volunteer who did search all night, according to some newspapers. People were indeed concerned about the weather because Jess had a corduroy jacket and pants, which, while better than thin clothing, would not have been able to handle the cold temperatures overnight. I agree that it's impressive that he endured the cold weather so well, especially given his clothes, as the temperatures went down to 35 degrees. Throughout the day, the temperatures climbed back up to the 70s. The condition that Jess was reported to be in was even better than what is listed in the book. If we ignore that he was hospitalized for a day, the reports indicate that scratches were pretty light, not deep, and they also indicate that they came from briar patches. Lastly, let's talk about the distance. It's often reported as half a dozen miles, with initial, and from what I can see, less accurate, reports saying around 4 miles. During the time, the weather was dry. I mention this because it affects how far children are expected to travel. According to the book Lost Person Behavior by Robert Coaster, children in the mountains in temperate climates travel up to 2.8 miles from where they started. In dry climates, the range extends to 5.6 miles. I could be reading this table wrong, and if you think I am, let me know. But from how I read it, this seems to indicate that in dry weather, half a dozen or so miles is not out of the question for children of Jess's age. Interesting then that Paulides would declare that he is puzzled by the distance traveled, since he himself has quoted this exact table in the past. Additionally, one article that I read said that the distance of 6 miles was not air miles, but accounted for a circuitous journey that followed a road for a while and went over a hill, not 2 mountains, and the actual distance in air miles was a single mile, according to an article from La Grande Observer. It's hard to say which one is more accurate, since there are varying reports about the exact numbers and details. While 2 articles that I read said that people were puzzled about how he made it so far, those same articles declared that he had wandered away on his own. Once again, I'd like to thank my patrons over at patreon.com for their very generous support and for providing me with more motivation to continue with this series. In particular, I'd like to thank the anonymous donor, of the public recognition tier. You know who you are. Thank you. And thank you for watching. Until next time, take care.